Welcome back to Creative Mathematics and Coding with CodeWorld, Unit 1, Lesson 2, Part 2, Variables. In the last part, you built up an understanding of values and the equations that tell us when two values are the same. Now let's add one more piece to that puzzle. Variables let you assign names to values. When you tell the computer about a variable, you need to tell it what value it names, and you do that with an equation. But not just any equation. The equations that define variables are special and are always written in the same form. The variable goes on the left side of the equal sign, and your description of the value goes on the right. Here are some examples. You've seen this line plenty of times, haven't you? What it's doing is defining a variable called program. The value of program is this specific computer program that shows a drawing of a name tag. This equation defines the variable name tag. In this case, name tag is just a circle with a radius of 7. This equation defines a variable called name, and name has the value Beowulf. Remember, we write Beowulf in quotation marks to let the computer know that this isn't an expression it needs to interpret, but this specific word. Here's an equation with a number. The variable age is defined to be equal to 13. And finally, here we define our favorite color as a variable equal to red. You can add all of these lines to the same program. Remember, your program is sort of like a dictionary or a glossary. Its whole purpose is to define these variables. Okay, let's say a quick word about spelling. When you're using a word the computer already knows, it's important that you spell it correctly. And that means using capital letters where you need them and lowercase letters as well. When you define a variable of your own, like we're doing here, it's also a good idea to spell it carefully. The computer won't know if you misspell it, but it will know whether you've spelled it the same way everywhere you use it. And the easiest way to do that is just to spell it correctly. You might realize there's something a little different about this last variable, favorite color. In the eyes of the computer, every variable name needs to be one word long. But sometimes our description of the variable seems like it should be more than one word. When that happens, we choose a variable name with all those letters run together. But to make it a little more readable, we capitalize the letters of any new words inside of the variable name. This convention is known as camel case. Why? Because of the hump in the middle of the word. Now it's your turn. Head over to CodeWorld and open the project you saved in Lesson 1 that draws a name tag. We'll use this project to play around with defining some new variables and seeing how things work. When you wrote your name tag program in the previous lesson, you defined two variables called program and name tag. Remember, you always have to define program because that's the program you're trying to create. But now let's add some more variables. You could define your age, which is a number. You could define your favorite color or a nickname. Let's look at what happens if we run this program. The program is the same as it was before, because defining new words doesn't change the meaning of that special word program. And the computer warns us right down here that we've defined these words but not used them. All right, now you've defined some variables. But as we pointed out, the only variable the computer really cares about is program, that special variable that you always have to define. So why would you define other variables if the computer isn't going to look for them? The reason you define a variable is so that you can use that name in the definition of something else. This line by itself, size equals 7, won't change anything about a program that it appears in. But it becomes important once you add this second line. Here I've defined name tag to be a circle whose radius is size. And because size was defined to be 7, that circle will have a radius of 7. This gets at a question you might have. Why do we call them variables? The word variable is based on the root vary, which means change. Now, we have to be careful here. Variables don't change when you perform operations on them. So if I wrote size plus 2, That would be a description of the number 9, 7 plus 2, but it wouldn't change the value of size. But here's where variables do change. If you modify your code to change the value of one variable, all of the other variables that refer to it change along with it. And that establishes a relationship between the value of one variable and the values of other variables defined in your program. In this case, if I define size to be 5, name tag would be one picture. If size became 6, name tag would be another picture. Change size to 7, it gets bigger, and 8, it gets even larger than that. As I modify my program to change the value of size, the value of the picture name tag changes along with it. All right, it's your turn again. Let's go back to your name tag programs, where we'll start to not just define variables, but use them to make your program different. For example, instead of the name in the argument to the text function, I could use the variable nickname. Notice how I don't use quotation marks. This tells the computer that I'm not telling it a literal name to use. Instead, I'm using a variable which is defined somewhere else. That's it for now. See you next time.